All right. I am usually a lot more visibly Palestinian, but today I'm a little toned down. Halil Khufiyya. Hell yeah. You got me, girl. All right. I always like to get a sense of where my other Palestinians are in the room. So if you're Palestinian, can you raise your hand? If you're an honorary Palestinian, can you raise your hand? Yalla, yalla. Amazing. So my great-grandmother, who had 8 children and countless grandchildren and is actually older than the Israeli occupation, yes, recently passed away. Allah yarhamha. She passed away last week, and the amount of people that came to her funeral honestly gave me full-body chills. The amount of people that we didn't know knew her gave me full-body chills. And when she was alive, she used to do tatriz on pillows where she would write your name. And if you were getting married, she'd write your name with your husband's name. And I never got the husband pillow, so that was something that really sat heavy. But when I was going through my closet, I found the being born pillow that has my name on it on its own. And I think that's when it really dawned on me that there was no pillows coming. And I know a lot of us have very powerful women in our lives. So I wrote a poem called Daughters. When you are still in the womb, you already have all of the eggs you will ever produce stored inside you. Meaning you were a thought in your mother's mind before she was even born. And your grandmother was a shelter for you both and her mother before her, stretching back all the way to the original family matriarch, Allah yarhamha. Carrying whispers of entire future lines of powerful women. I wonder at what generations already exist within me and hope that they carry their identity long after my name has faded away. I hope that they stitch little X's with their chubby fingers as girls, weaving stories into every cross-stitch lines, threads connecting them to balconies overlooking the seas of Haifa and the beautiful silver green of Tulkarim olive trees. I hope they still make ma'luba and tabbil on the still hot pot, hoping and praying it didn't burn while their daughters look on, eyes crinkled with laughter. And if they're my great-great-great-granddaughters, I know they'll have an army of opinionated daughters, each with equally picky palates, scooping leban on their heaping, steaming plates. I hope they still learn how to dabka, holding hands, while their feet smack the floor with a resounding crash, dancing like the fallahin did in their fields and the city folk did on their cobbled stones, the future mirroring the past we remember. But most importantly, I hope their kitchens are blessed with a massive gray tin scribbled on by a stranger's hand in Arabic script. I do not know what their names will be. These women I will never meet, though each will carry a part of me. But if they're my own, I know that they will smile as they uncork liquid gold, olive oil from trees old enough to have seen me grown, carrying memories of the past into these blessed future homes. Thank you. How many of you have had your heart broken during a genocide? You don't know what to do with the grief because you feel like you can't own the grief, right? You feel like you don't have a right to sadness. And this is the first poem I wrote that was about me since the genocide started. But is it really? I'll leave that to you. I haven't written a poem in so long, I nearly stopped calling myself a poet. Words that used to tumble now stopped, stuttered, frozen. I can't form proper sentences without falling over something I think I ought to be talking about. Some cause I should stand up for, some story I forgot to share, a social justice warrior with a keyboard or a pen, and always lips that move to call out the things that aren't meant to be quite so evil. I want to write. I want to write about love and loss, so I start with myself but get lost in geopolitical border wars and demolitions, and suddenly it's love, but it's not mine. It's lost, but it's about a home that was bombed and about the stories that got buried with the bodies. I read a caption about wildfires and how it's not just the loss of life, but the loss of proof of life. The loss of the remnants of people that had been lost, of jackets last worn by fathers and photo albums filled with your great-great-great-granddaughters, great-grandmother's wedding pictures, and that mixtape your first love made you in the 8th grade. Perhaps it is poetic that they were burned on a pyre no one wanted to light. Perhaps I am trying to force poetry out of tragedy so that people may snap for me. I start another sentence, another poem about me, about my feelings, perhaps, so I speak about numbness. And the numbness finds itself melted into grief. And I remember that quote about grief by that person whose name, for the life of me, I can never quite remember, that says that grief is just love in a heavy coat. And I think about how all that love I held for him made me sink to my knees in a heaping pile of coats, only these coats had pockets filled with bricks, and the floor was not a floor, it was an ocean, and I was drowning in the loss of the person I thought you were, only I knew I couldn't allow myself to sink any further, so I start shrugging off coat after coat after coat until I begin to float a little, until I climb back onto land and remember who I was and righted my worldview and remembered how I lived my entire life making me before there was ever a you. And yes, sometimes the heavy coat still finds its ways around my shoulders, and sometimes I feel that familiar pull towards the dark depths of the ocean, but I know how to swim now. I know how to swim, so I think of swimming. And I can't think of swimming without thinking of Gaza, so now my poem about me is the truest form of me, which is to say intertwined with all of the me's that don't have the luxury to grieve a boy who hurt them because another boy is pointing an AK-47 at their faces, and this boy always shoots. This boy always shoots, and I think of shooting and my thoughts go to my camera, and it's me again, it's me. Speaking of film, and I think of films, and somehow I fixated on Miss Rachel. And I remember how those children watched her in their tents. And I remember how they had houses bigger than mine before the war. And I know there are so many people to grieve, but there are also houses. There are also houses and spaces, places, restaurants filled with phantom faces, phantom people like Les Mis, empty chairs at empty tables. Now my friends are dead and gone, and I'd always liked that song. I'd always loved that song, belted it out with tears quivering on my lashes. Now I think of it often, only my tears fall in twin rivers because it's not just a song anymore. It's not just a song. I started this poem saying I wasn't a poet, and perhaps this piece still does not qualify, but if any of my words have meaning, let them be this. God knows and God sees, and his justice is perfect. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.